This was a while ago. LeBron and Ty Lue kind of trying to talk it out a little bit. Neither one of them were happy to close the third quarter.
And this is not uncommon among NBA teams. It's certainly not uncommon with the Cavaliers.
Whitlock, is LeBron trying to get Ty Lue fired?
Hashtag strive for a new coach. We would call it.
3-point game, 57-54. Time now to check in with the Access Sportsnet studio. It is the Jack in the Box halftime report. By Dwight Howard. Look at LeBron. Why not? Actively involved.
Always help each other. That's the name of the game.
You have to guard those guys a lot different, which leaves maybe an opportunity for the roll man. So even though the same play may be run, it's executed differently, and more importantly, Brian, the defense is going to defend it differently. They may go under the screen and not allow Marc Gasol or
Frank Vogel has coached his final game for the Lakers. A decision is expected to be shared with him as soon as Monday.
No, not Monday.
ESPN. Lakers.
He's saying it was touched last by Denver. Darvin Ham not going to challenge it though. And LeBron really infuriated. He is screaming at his bench.
The Lakers today firing Coach Darvin Ham after LA's first-round playoff loss to the Nuggets.
Let's get right to it. Steve Nash out just 7 games into his 3rd season with the Nets.
Against the Thunder. Phoenix Suns fired head coach Frank Vogel Thursday, 11 days after Phoenix was swept out of the postseason's first round by the Timberwolves.
Scapegoated Frank, obviously, and Russ all year.
Detroit Pistons telling our Adrian Wojnarowski the largest coaching deal in NBA history. So happy for the city of Detroit. They got themselves a good one. But do you have a problem, Stephen A., with him getting a $13 million a year deal?
The money. I mean, that's something that people don't talk about.
All right, the time has come where we need to talk about the elephant in the room. I've done videos already talking about Doc Rivers. I've talked a bit about the Lakers coaching struggles, and then I was going to make a video about how Monty Williams fleeced the Pistons contract. And then I figured, why not make a video addressing them all? There is a fundamental problem with how NBA coaching is handled in the league, and the problem seems to only be growing until eventually the bubble pops and there's a new lockout in order to make new player agreements again. With that being said, let's do an analysis as to what the coaching problem in the NBA is, why it's such a big issue, and how it can possibly be fixed.
This was a while ago. LeBron and Ty Lue kind of trying to talk it out a little bit. Neither one of them were happy to close the third quarter.
And this is not uncommon among NBA teams. It's certainly not uncommon with the Cavaliers.
First, let's start off with the diminishing power of coaches. I talked a lot about this with the KD Nets and the Lakers when they had Vogel. Coaches with superstar talents have practically no power at all, and people are starting to realize it. When JJ Redick got hired, people immediately started making jokes about it, saying the new LeBron assistant has now been hired. Due to many player agreements as well as the power that the media gives, star players on a team tend to have more say on how a team is run more than the actual coach themselves, with the coach acting more as a figurehead, which we'll discuss why that makes them a scapegoat in the next section. An article from Medium that we'll reference quite a few times throughout this video states it perfectly, saying, when coaches respond to the power of their players, usually by dictating the culture and environment of the team, akin to the top college programs, they are often met with hostility and bitterness from their players and front office executives. This is the reality of being a coach in today's NBA, with instability and pressure causing unhealthiness and unhappiness to be rampant among the individuals who run the sidelines. The Athletic even further states this with the simple sentence, they are typically the bosses in name only. Now, as we go further into this point, I will be focusing on LeBron and his teams, but he is by far not the only team victim to this. But he does have the most overlying examples that we can turn to and dissect together as a result of being the most popular player in the sport and in GOAT arguments. Again, in the Medium article, they state, in a season full of chaos while trying to make his third straight NBA Finals, Ty Lue had enough. Navigating through consistent physical pain, roster upheaval, and the pressure of coaching a LeBron James-led roster, he was never fully himself throughout the first half of the 2017 to 2018 season. It continues on, stating, throughout recent seasons, the balance of power has shifted to the players, and coaching has become a subservient role because of this shift in power. Well, when exactly did this start? Well, this has been a trend for a while. And yes, players have always had a say in who their coach is, but it really started to take effect in 2020. For the Lakers, this was hugely prevalent during the years of Frank Vogel, and it was also hugely prevalent when the Nets got their big three. Now, these happened around the same time, which is important because of how things of the outside world can affect sports in ways we do not expect. What's the first thing that you think of when someone says 2020?
Well, the first two games between these teams were in Utah. The Thunder in the final 18 will play Utah 2 more times, and both of those will be here in Oklahoma City. Starting lineups were announced. Teams went through warm-up. Everybody was ready to go out and take the floor. And then a discussion and a delay here in Oklahoma City.
All right, following that breaking news, let's break in here with Chris Paul entering the NBA's COVID-19 health and safety protocols.
The Nets will be without 5 players who entered COVID protocols for tonight's game against the Raptors.
Exactly. The health and safety protocols hindered the ability of coaches and players to communicate effectively, often with coaches being out altogether with the protocols. This already helped set a path for the players to take a bit more action in how the team should attack on the court. Again, we see this several times as LeBron is on the sidelines barking orders and making plays when he isn't playing. A huge responsibility for coaches is to keep egos in check, and it's hard to do that when you yourself are one of the egos, which is one of the reasons why Doc Rivers doesn't make a good coach, because he stoops to the player's level. But that's a point for another video, as I've discussed many times. Regardless, you cannot coach players when you are a player, and yet that's always what happens now on big market teams. To be a coach, you have to first be a leader, which it seems they are not getting the chance to be anymore. 2 articles from Sportskeeda go on to phrase it this way. NBA head coaches are responsible for many things, from managing personalities and egos to developing game plans and scouting opponents. They must be excellent communicators and motivators, able to get the most out of their players and make quick decisions during the heat of the games. With the amount of talent in the NBA, there are numerous occasions where stars would band together to capture a championship or add more rings to their collection. Interestingly, some wonder whether coaches still have a presence or impact on their team or not. An article from the New York Sun following the Redick hiring also puts it in plain black and white. The job no longer comes with the authority to manage the players, games, and their coaching careers without potential repercussions. Increased player influence, the analytics revolution, the expectation to win championships, and constant player movement handcuffed NBA coaches from implementing a long-term program that develops players in a winning system. Even success doesn't guarantee stability. The Athletic again states this further, saying coaches get fired all the time, but players grow more and more powerful because of it, and too often wield that power to disrupt any chance of stability these franchises had to begin with. Players are aware that they are what brings in the money. They're what brings in the entertainment, and therefore, they hold the power. The hierarchy has been completely flipped on its head. Rather than players getting in line behind their coach, the coach now has to get in line behind the players, or they risk being fired. The Sun article continues saying, increased player influence is undermining coach's authority. Mr. James, who was instrumental in the removal of David Blatt when he was at Cleveland, came under scrutiny for influencing the fire of Mr. Ham. A huge example of this was when Kyrie was not traded from the Nets, simply because KD threatened that if they did, they would have to trade KD next. And for a while, that threat worked, until they did trade Kyrie, and reportedly in less than 24 hours was when KD's trade was requested, fulfilling on that threat. On top of that, Steve Nash being fired was being spearheaded by Durant. And then, when it finally happened, he acted surprised and shocked.
Who killed Hannibal?
Again, this is largely due to the scapegoat point, which will be addressed shortly. As the Sun puts it, it's easier to fire coaches than get rid of players. Again, the focus is on the Lakers now, as the Sun ends the article saying, NBA coaches find themselves navigating franchises where their influence is under constant threat from players, others in the organization, and the press. Mr. Reddick's goal is to change that trend or become another casualty of the current NBA landscape. On the Nets side of things, once again, Kenny Atkinson helped develop a roster of D'Angelo Russell, Joe Harris, Jarrett Allen, Karis LeVert, and Spencer Dinwiddie. And all that changed when the superstars came in, with the Medium article from earlier saying, Atkinson's voice no longer echoed with the same power it had just months earlier. By the preseason, Irving was dealing with his uncontrollable mood swings while demanding an almost unparalleled amount of isolation possessions on offense. Durant, for his part, questions if Atkinson was a championship coach months after praising him, all while never taking the floor this season. And worst of all, the locker room became divided over Atkinson's decision to start Allen, a young, athletic center, over Jordan, whose effectiveness has fallen precipitously since his departure from LA. Players are supposed to put winning above all, so it's almost disturbing to see how quickly they become frustrated over a trivial decision to start Allen, who is unquestionably a better player than Jordan. Perhaps most telling of all was Atkinson's push for his firing, as he felt his new team in Brooklyn was too toxic and too divided for him to want to continue coaching them. With that, there's no true leader on any team anymore. The power is split between the star and the coach, often more in the star's favor, leaving the team uncoordinated and confused when playing, as sometimes they have conflicting strategies and feedback. I talked a lot about this in my original video with a lot of highlighted evidence. If you look at these highlights, the pace of the game seems slow. The players are jogging and unenergetic. The players also seem lost and uncoordinated, leaving players open or not defending well. This goes back to what I said earlier. Without LeBron on the floor, the Lakers have no idea what to do. It becomes a question of who's the first option, second option, or even the third option, when with LeBron and AD, that answer was pretty obvious. With so many players, it would appear to a more casual fan that this adds great depth to the bench, perfect for injuries like the ones we've seen with LeBron and AD. Except, the problem, to put simply, is more of a problem of too much depth, again without an obvious leader. The communication on the floor is almost non-existent, as no one knows who to play through as LeBron yells on the sideline, still trying to play coach. Sports Illustrated continues to add on to this point, saying, coaching still matters, but coaches seem like an afterthought, perhaps even a bit diminished. The great partnerships of the past were built on trust and communication, and forged over years. It's how winning culture takes root. The star and coach amplifying one another, setting expectations for everyone else. What happens when that bond disappears? Does culture go with it? Do dynasties disappear? Have today's stars lost something essential? And One Hoops on YouTube also has a video diving in a bit into this problem, and he states it's easier to coach high school and college level players as they're still developing their way of play, their skills and weaknesses, and most importantly, their character. But when they get to the NBA, they've been working so hard on their craft for years, and they've reached the pinnacle of sports, playing in the National Basketball Association. And so, they're more set in their ways, and it's harder for them to take criticism as a whole. But the right coach knows how to handle that and put the adults in their place and get them to listen. Tell them that just because they play in the NBA doesn't mean they have it all figured out, and that they can still improve. And that is what leads to championships. If you read through that whole lengthy Sports Illustrated article, they talk a lot about how teams with long-standing coaches succeed. They have a pure bond with the coach. The Lakers loved Phil Jackson. Magic loved Riley. Steve Kerr and Curry love each other. And you don't see that much anymore. Popovich is one of the greatest coaches of all time, and it's because he truly cares about the players as a person. Many players have come out and said this. When DeRozan's father died, Pop stayed back and cried with him. Tim Duncan stated in his Hall of Fame speech how Pop visited Tim Duncan's family and his island. Pop has mandatory team meals and events to bring the teammates together and foster belonging. Hence the whole Spurs is family culture. And through that, he's won 5 championships. Pop has said himself that the reason he's successful is because Tim Duncan allowed himself to be coached, and not many players do now. Mike Brown was asked as well how he made the Kings turn into a team to possibly take out the Warriors after a 15-year drought in the playoffs, and he responded stating that he owes it to De'Aaron Fox because, just like Tim Duncan, he allowed himself to be coached, just as he saw with his stars and Popovich. This is what it all boils down to. One word can fix this whole situation. Trust. Trust from both sides. The players have to have enough trust in the coach in order to get the job done and lead. Put the stars in their place, where they need to be, work on rotations, work on skills and weaknesses, and make a championship roster, without hearing the fussing and backtalk like a toddler, like we described that Kenny Atkinson received when putting Allen in over DeAndre Jordan. But the coach also has to have trust that the players will let them do their job. Again, the pattern has been to fire the coach at the first sign of something going wrong, being the one everyone points to as a problem, even when it's obvious that they aren't. This leads back to all the problems we've discussed. Coaches become timid, scared, and small to actually lead and challenge the players' ideas, and instead they fall in line and go along with it, because doing something that doesn't align with the team or its players places a target on them. The coaches have to have the trust in the players that they will not be backstabbed the first chance the team gets, and that the players will trust their ideas and try to make new game plans and defend the coach against criticism. This is why I give massive praise to Russell Westbrook as he met with Ty Lue over this exact issue and was able to be humble enough to take a smaller role on the team for the sake of the franchise's success more than his own. But when things like that don't happen, we get into the next point. I wasn't sure if this would be more appropriate for this section or the next, but it's gotten to the point that coaches are so blatantly aware of the lack of respect and control they get in their position that they decided to stay at the college or high school level, as we described before. Once again, a huge example of this is the Lakers, with sideline sources reporting that the UConn coach Dan Hurley declined an extra $20 million to stay with UConn instead of coaching for the Lakers, coaching for $50 million over $70.
Against the Thunder. Phoenix Suns fired head coach Frank Vogel Thursday, 11 days after Phoenix was swept out of the postseason's first round by the Timberwolves, and after Vogel had expressed he thought the ownership had his back. Former Bucks head coach and former NBA champion Mike Budenholzer is the Suns.
This is what a lot of you probably expected this video to be about, which makes sense as this problem starts to set up a majority of the other problems. And this problem is one of the most prevalent and glaring. So how did this problem occur, and how did it get so bad? As stated before, the easiest way to break it down is too many NBA coaches are replaceable parts and convenient scapegoats when things go wrong. It's easier to fire coaches than get rid of players. The OHS Observer reports it saying, "The firing of coaches is unfortunately becoming a common trend across the league. When the NBA revolves around star players and teams value immediate success, the coaching carousel spins faster than ever." So again, this has a lot to do with player power, which was discussed in the previous section. But also a huge problem for this has to deal with the media. If you recall, in the Suns article, it said NBA coaches, meanwhile, find themselves navigating franchises where their influence is under constant threat from the players, others in the organization, and the press. I talked a lot about the problem of the media in another LeBron video of mine, which again leads to why this has been a more glaring issue for the Lakers with LeBron's popularity. As the OHS article continues, this pressure is worsened by the influence of social media, as a team's performance can be heavily scrutinized and commented on in real time. This instant feedback loop and hypervisibility ultimately creates a hostile environment where reactional decisions such as firing a coach becomes the more frequent course of action. These seemingly quick fixes ignores the fact that true success requires patience and long-term development. As stated, with the media, fans expect more immediate success, and as failures happen, they expect immediate changes. The coaches are the easiest to pick out and replace, and that comes with immense pressure to succeed, because again, at the first failure, they'll be gone. The media only makes this worse as described in previous videos, as the media magnifies failures and successes and helps control the narrative. Now, I'm not going to sit here and defend Darvin Ham or Frank Vogel by any means, as I don't think they're amazing coaches either. However, when the media tends to show more clips of Ham and Vogel being confused or conflicted in a timeout, where does your thought process go? On top of that, when LeBron and AD straight up ignore Darvin Ham, where do people's minds tend to go? Is it that Darvin Ham is not being respected by his players and that they need to mature and listen to his advice and trust him, like I said in the previous section? Or is the mindset more likely to trust AD and LeBron as star players, and their reaction is a result of Ham not knowing what he's doing? Again, the mindset is almost always to be on the player's side rather than the coaches because of the media. But now, with so many coaches fired in a short amount of time, people are starting to take notice that the coaches are not the problem. Of the last 5 coaches to win the NBA Finals, 4 have been fired, with Lue in 2016, Nurse in 2019, Frank Vogel in 2020, and Budenholzer in 2021. Back in 2019, SB Nation wrote an article stating that a head coaching job was stable in the NBA. And just a year later is when a majority of these articles I'm using were written, causing a cascade of mistrust in the position, with articles now being written with the exact opposite, stating that coaching continuity is a thing of the past. Coaches have zero job security, and Bleacher Report going as far as even making a ranking as to which coach will be fired next. The feeling towards coaches has completely been disrupted. There are only 3 coaches that have kept their position for several years. Popovich, as I mentioned earlier, Kerr, that I mentioned with Curry, and Spoelstra. Again, a huge reason for this is the relationship between the coach and the player that I described in the previous section. The Mason Report puts it saying the NBA has become a cesspool of finger pointing and refusal to acknowledge personal failure as the nexus for poor performance. This endless trend of scapegoating coaches for the failures of players is nonsensical and disingenuous. Every win and every loss comes to talent, scheme, and effort. It's just that simple. Coaches are responsible for the scheme, while the players own, or at least should own, the talent and effort portions. Well, we've already spent the better part of this video stating how players are the issue. But who else is at fault? Well, it's also partly due to everyone above the coaches as well. Let's take Frank Vogel, for example. He's had to deal with the same problem twice. With the Lakers that we mentioned, and now the Suns. Being dropped into a team full of all-stars and expecting him to figure it out. But if the team already doesn't work, how is he supposed to do that? I made the analogy before that when you put faulty wires in the building, you can't fault the firefighter for trying to put the electrical fire out. You have to fault the electrician for putting the wires in. The electrician in this analogy is the GM and front office. With the Lakers, they got huge superstar talent names, but each one of them were out of their prime and they all carried an ego as well. Their play styles also didn't mesh well at all either, as we saw with Westbrook, having to share the paint with LeBron and AD. And because Vogel couldn't figure it out after the championship, he was fired. And then he went to the Suns with the exact same issue, having to meld KD, Booker, and Beal together, ultimately failing and being fired from Phoenix as well. Again, this is why I made a video predicting that the 2021 Lakers would not repeat and again be destined for failure. You cannot expect someone to put a puzzle piece together with the incorrect pieces. It's on the GM and the front office to make sure the pieces fit together. Obviously, the coach is in charge of building off the strengths and weaknesses of each player and making the necessary rotations. But when the team is just broken, it's nearly impossible to make it a championship roster. The Mason Report goes on a long rant about this point, stating, "Who fires Hall of Famers? The Houston Rockets, that's who. Head coach Devin McHale was let go after 11 games. Are you scratching your head yet? Good. You should be." General Manager Daryl Morey claimed in his post-McHale firing press conference the team is not responding to Devin McHale. No, the team was not responding to adversity and physical challenges. McHale was the least of their concerns. Citing an injury-prone center, Dwight Howard, notorious for lacking the ambition to be great, was Morey's first mistake. Assuming the team would somehow erect a new identity with Howard serving as the cornerstone to building a winner was absurd. Howard had done nothing since leaving Orlando to indicate that he was worthy of a max contract or worthy of a consideration as a franchise bedrock. Instead of a pink slip, McHale deserved a medal for guiding the team missing its best defender and top rebounder not only to the playoffs but also to the conference finals. Since firing McHale with a record of 4-7, the Rockets have gone 23-20. Does this record showcase the amount of response Daryl Morey was hoping when he terminated the Hall of Famer? After the Vogel firing, the Suns president stated, "We all take accountability, and it's my job, along with Josh and ownership, to build a championship team." But that is completely incorrect. If they were taking accountability, they would state how terrible of an idea it was to sign 3 stars to massive 5-year expensive contracts before seeing how well they fit together. As stated in the previous section, an Inside the Suns article finishes it off saying, It would have taken much work to rebuild the trust between the head coaches and the players, along with a completely recalibrated staff. But besides the GMs, team owners and the NBA in general is responsible for part of the problem. In 1976, the National Basketball Coaching Association was created, much like the Players Association, as a union in order to work in the coach's best interest. In fact, it wasn't until 2017 when Coach of the Year became an award through this organization. However, with both a Players Association and a Coaches Association, at times they can find themselves at odds. And again, the players' side is often taken by the NBA and the owners. Previous coaches have come out and stated the multiple health problems they've had due to the stress of coaching, including head pains, chest pains, and even severe as panic attacks and heart issues as a result of the strain the job brings. When issues like this were brought up to both the owners and the NBA directly, they tended to be swiftly ignored as they were seen as part of the job. Now all sides are starting to take more action. Basketball Network wrote an article after Ty Lue was reported saying, "A coach makes one mistake or two mistakes and he gets fired, but a player can have 7 turnovers, go 4 for 15 shooting, but they keep firing good coaches. They keep blaming the coaches. Everybody's gonna make mistakes." In an age and time where players are overprotected on and off court, Lue highlighted the hypocrisy of NBA team owners for not putting in the effort to remove some pressure of the coaches. Ty Lue concluded by indicating how the current trend of firing coaches is worrisome. To support his argument, only 5 of the league's 30 coaches have held their present-day job for more than 3 full NBA seasons. The Medium article states as well, seeing his wellness and his career at a crossroads, Steve Clifford finally prioritized his health over his career, a choice that many in the industry fear, especially because a second opportunity is never promised in sports. They go on to describe the severe effects of his health, stating, "After waking up early before the rest of the staff for the Hornets' first game back at home after the road trip, Clifford sensed something was wrong. His head was pounding and rumbling, debilitating feeling that was the tipping point in his battle against his health. He texted an assistant on his staff, Pat Delaney, and begged him to run shoot-around while he struggled with the ill feeling in his body. He went to the car to go home, seeking a reprieve from the pounding in his head. I went out to drive home because I only lived 4 blocks away. But he said, once I sat in my car, I knew it wouldn't be smart for me to drive, so I just walked home. The reason he couldn't drive home was because his body was trembling as he sat in the driver's seat. 2 days later, after undergoing a variety of tests from the Hornets medical staff, who are usually dedicated to the players, it was announced that Clifford would take a leave of absence. But that isn't the only one, as again it goes on to describe Ty Lue struggling with chest pains and other troubling symptoms, compounded by a loss of sleep throughout the year. Lue said in a statement, despite a battery of tests, there were no conclusions as to what the exact issue was. And the Medium article finally finishes off the point I've been making, saying, new measures are being put in place, and the life of coaches no longer have to be stressful and tense. In particular, the National Basketball Coaches Association is using its resources to provide better opportunities for coaches to lead healthy lives. This indicated a free screening program at the NBA Summer League where coaches can proactively work on building healthy habits months before the stress, late-night grinds, and anxiety kicks in. According to NBA.com, over 60 coaches got screening in 2 days of Orlando Summer League, undergoing a battery of tests to ensure good health. But the reality of coaching in today's NBA remains. Those who suffered physical and emotional pain while coaching remain the norm, not the exception. And no amount of preparation during June or July can truly prepare a coach from staying up until 4 a.m. the night before a Game 7 in the NBA playoffs. For now, all the league can do is provide better resources for coaches to live healthy lives, and the results will come in time.
The Detroit Pistons telling our Adrian Wojnarowski the largest coaching deal in NBA history. So happy for the city of Detroit. They got themselves a good one. But do you have a problem, Stephen A., with him getting a $13 million a year deal?
So with all these things going wrong, let's talk about even more problems that arise from this, particularly people playing this system to their advantage. Coaches and players are cheating the system. Before I even get into this section, the New York Sun article describes it best, saying, Mr. Redick's most relevant job qualification is his friendship with Lakers superstar LeBron James. They co-hosted the podcast Mind the Game, which debuted in March, but reportedly will be discontinued. Mr. James, 39, can become an unrestricted free agent this summer, which is logical to suggest he'll re-sign with the Lakers now that his friend is the head coach. And that's no secret, but it connects to the overlying issue. LeBron has realized his power and has hired people he knows so that he can leverage his friendship to easily have more say in how the team is run. Even outside Redick and LeBron's fans, the Lakers have had 4 new coaches in 7 years. Half of those, the Lakers were the first team that they became the head coach of, and now they have JJ Redick, who hasn't even been an assistant coach before. The Lakers are deliberately hiring rookie and unseasoned coaches in order to make it easier to dump them and manipulate. And again, it doesn't just go for the Lakers, as the Nets hired Steve Nash after the begging of KD, only for him to get fired again from KD and Kyrie's request. The Bucks got AJ Griffin only for him to be fired 6 months into his job. Players are targeting newer coaches in order to give themselves more power on the team, as we described before. However, as stated before, the trust goes both ways, and there are coaches that have taken advantage of the system. Just as KD signed a 5-year contract with the Suns, securing payment even if they fail, coaches are now doing the same. Monty Williams signed a 6-year contract with the Pistons, despite the Pistons being one of the worst teams. He knew that he would be on the chopping block just due to this coaching landscape, and somehow he was able to convince them to sign him to one of the largest coaching contracts ever. Prior to him, only one coach was making $10 million a year, Greg Popovich. Afterwards, multiple coaches started demanding similar salaries, but he played the system and this money was now guaranteed, getting $78 million over the next 5 years while not doing anything, by signing to an already losing team destined for failure at a very high price, knowing that they would dump him. As his contract already started a ripple effect of large contracts, we could see a ripple of more coaches taking advantage of the one-and-done year with teams, dumping them and turning the coaching role into a passive income job for contract fleecing.
The quick answer is obviously Troy, the players, and the money. I mean, that's something that people don't talk about. They always say it wasn't the money. I always laugh at that. I think that's disrespectful. When somebody is that generous to pay me that kind of money, one, that should be applauded, and two, it should be talked about.
On top of that, you have coaches like Doc Rivers. Glenn Rivers has been playing the system for years. He knows a lot of it is the media's game, as stated before, which is why he's constantly making excuses for himself and boosting his own image in order to get rehired somewhere. To him, remaining relevant and only working 1 year for a team is still a win. With him already being massively criticized, if teams need a scapegoat, he's the easy choice. Put simply, Glenn Rivers can start to weaponize his incompetence and failures in a strategic way in order to go to teams that are seeking out that as a place to direct their negativity, fully embracing the scapegoat role rather than running from it. Not to sound cynical or like a conspiracy theorist, but what's stopping this from becoming the trend? If teams are looking for a scapegoat and coaches start becoming okay with that, Does losing then start to become the goal for coaches rather than winning, so that they're easy for a team to target as a new, easily manipulated figurehead? Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this in-depth analysis into the coaching problem the NBA is facing, and some ways it can either be fixed or get worse. I've had some of these points on my chest for a while, and I wanted to find some resources to back it rather than just ranting and stating my opinions. So that's why there was a lot of articles in this one. But what do you guys think? Let me know down in the comments, and thank you guys so much as always for the support. I truly mean that. My most competitive season video is so far my second highest viewed video ever, and who knows, maybe it can become the most viewed video by the end of the year. My goal this year was to hit 10K by December, but we're already about to hit 7.5K by early July. So let's see what we hit by 2025. If you guys further want to support me, there are links to my socials such as Discord and Instagram in the description where you can follow me or join the community. Or you can support me directly via becoming a YouTube member or a patron. If you don't feel like doing that, of course, you can always do the easy and free option, which is liking, subscribing, or sharing the video around, as it helps me out as well, and it makes the YouTube algorithm very happy. Again, thank you all for your continued support, and I hope I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.
This is not okay. This needs to stop now.